Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you send our way and really dig into them. We look for the key insights, the things that maybe connect, the stuff that makes you think.
Exactly. The idea is to get you, the learner, really well informed, but, efficiently. We know you're curious, want to go deeper, but maybe don't want to get totally bogged down.
Right. So today we're diving into something pretty fascinating, how knowledge and value work in the arts, and how they seem to be, well, always shifting.
That's right. Our source for this is a document called the artsperspectives.pdf. And we're going to explore things like, why old techniques sometimes make a comeback, how artworks get interpreted differently over time.
And what actually makes art valuable today.
Mhm.
Okay, sounds great. Let's jump straight in with that first question from the source. Is there really such a thing as obsolete knowledge in art?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Mhm.
Because you'd think with technology moving so fast, older ways of doing things would just kind of fade away.
Right, become irrelevant.
But what's interesting, and what the source points out, is that artistic skills often don't vanish completely. It's more like they go dormant for a while.
Dormant, like hibernating.
Kind of, yeah. Waiting for the right moment, maybe the right technology, or just the right cultural mood to become relevant again.
Okay, I think I see. The examples help here, like vinyl mastering.
Exactly. Everyone thought vinyl was dead and buried when digital came along.
Totally. A museum piece.
But look now, you've got massive artists, Taylor Swift, huge K-pop groups releasing special vinyl editions. It's huge. They're even reopening pressing plants.
Wow. In Tennessee and Seoul, the source mentioned. Just to keep up, that's definitely a comeback.
It really is. And it's not just music. Think about hand-drawn cell animation.
Ah, yeah, Studio Ghibli.
Right. After CGI basically took over everything, you might think that was done for. But then you get The Boy and the Heron in 2023.
Which was stunning and a massive global success.
And it really showcased that beautiful traditional technique. It proves people still value that artistry, that skill. It never really went away.
And it's not always just about looking back, is it? The source mentions El Anatsui.
The Ghanaian sculptor. Incredible work.
Yeah, using traditional weaving looms, which you might think of as like purely craft.
But he uses them to create these amazing contemporary sculptures from bottle caps, those tapestries.
Shown at the Tate Modern. So he's taking that old knowledge, that skill, and applying it in a completely fresh, modern way.
Precisely. And one more, maybe more technical example, Christopher Nolan using old school film for Oppenheimer.
Oh, right, the 65 millimeter film and darkroom processing.
Yeah, he specifically wanted the look, the dynamic range that those older methods gave him, something digital couldn't quite capture for his vision.
So a technique that might seem obsolete was actually essential for his artistic goal.
Exactly. So the takeaway seems to be that obsolete in art is often temporary. It really depends on the context, the medium, the market, the ideas floating around.
It's more cyclical, maybe, than just a one-way street to the past.
That's a good way to put it. Which kind of leads us into the second question. Can a work of art mean something the artist didn't even intend?
Ooh, okay. This gets into interpretation, doesn't it? Like, who decides what something means?
It does. It suggests that once art is out there in the world, it can take on meanings, develop significances that maybe go way beyond what the creator originally had in mind.
How does that happen, according to the source?
Well, it touches on a few ideas. One is reception theory, basically. The idea that we, the audience, actively create meaning when we encounter a work. We bring our own stuff to it.
Our own experiences, biases.
Right. Then there's psychoanalysis, which might look for unconscious meanings the artist wasn't even aware of.
Yeah.
And even things like analyzing machine learning bias.
Wait, how does that fit in?
Well, think about early AI image generators, like Midjourney back in 2023. The source notes they sometimes produced images reflecting sort of Eurocentric beauty standards.
Right, I remember that discussion.
It probably wasn't deliberate programming, but a bias emerging from the training data. That's an unintended meaning or bias embedded in the creative output. It sparked important conversations.
That makes sense. And older examples, too.
Absolutely. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, written in 1818. She obviously knew nothing about AI or neural networks.
Of course not.
But now, it's seen as this crucial text for thinking about AI ethics, a relevance she couldn't possibly have imagined.
Wow, yeah. Or, Parasite. Bong Joon-ho's film.
Great example. Before COVID, it was clearly about class inequality.
Yeah.
But after the pandemic hit,
People started seeing it through the lens of like ventilation inequality, how the virus affected different communities based on their living conditions.
exactly, a whole new layer of meaning tied to a global event that likely wasn't top of mind for the director during filming or initial interviews.
So meaning isn't fixed. It can grow, change, pick up new layers depending on the world around it and who's looking.
Precisely. Meaning can be layered and evolve.
Mm.
Which connects nicely to our third question. How much does the context around an artwork shape how we understand it?
And the feeling I get is a lot.
Immensely.
Yeah.
The source really emphasizes that context is often the absolute key to getting the full meaning. Take it away, and you could lose huge chunks of understanding.
Okay, like the Banksy example. The girl with balloons shredding itself.
Perfect example. That act, that shredding, became this huge performance piece, a commentary on the art market.
Precisely because it happened right there at the Sotheby's auction.
Yeah.
In that high-stakes environment.
If he'd shredded it in a cafe somewhere, it just wouldn't have had that same resonance or meaning. The location, the event, was the context.
Okay. And Marina Abramovich. Rhythm Zero.
Another powerful one. That 1974 performance where she let the audience do anything to her. It's often discussed in terms of, human behavior, the potential for cruelty.
Yeah, it's pretty disturbing.
But knowing about the political situation in Yugoslavia at the time, the tensions in the 1970s, adds this whole other layer. It helps explain the urgency, the feeling behind relinquishing control in that specific historical moment.
So the political context deepens the meaning.
Definitely. And then there's the Beeple NFT sale. Every day's. That huge price tag, $69 million.
Insane.
Well, yes, there's the digital artwork itself, but the source points out that its value was massively boosted by the context. Christie's auction house gave it legitimacy, plus the whole hype around NFTs and Ethereum scarcity at that specific moment.
Factors completely outside the pixels on the screen.
Exactly. So strip away the context, the auction house, the market conditions, the historical moment, and you're potentially missing what made the artwork or its valuation so significant.
Right. Context is crucial. Which leads to the next question. Can art actually change how we interpret the world? Can it shift our perspective or even our actions?
It seems like it absolutely can. The source gives some really compelling examples of art acting as a catalyst for, well, real-world change, not just reflecting things, but actively influencing them.
Like Blue Planet 2, the David Attenborough series.
Yes. That series showed the impact of plastic pollution so vividly.
Oh, the poor turtles.
Yeah. And afterward, in the UK, sales of single-use plastic straws dropped by something like 53%. That's a huge, measurable behavioral shift directly linked to watching that series.
Wow. That's direct impact.
Definitely. Or think about HBO's Chernobyl series.
Gripping television.
And it had this unexpected side effect. Tourism to Pripyat, the Chernobyl exclusion zone, jumped by 40%. It literally changed how people interacted with that historical site and its narrative.
Reshaped their perception of it. And Kehinde Wiley's Obama portrait.
That's interesting because it wasn't just about hanging a painting in a gallery. The National Portrait Gallery organized a nationwide tour.
Bringing it to more people.
Right. Broadening access to that kind of civic iconography, presenting a different image of power and representation across the country.
And even digital art having real-world effects. The Ukrainian NFTs.
Yeah, the War Relief NFT projects in 2022, they raised around $50 million in crypto for humanitarian aid.
$50 million from digital art drops.
It shows how art, even in these new digital forms, can mobilize significant resources and have a tangible impact on global events.
So art isn't just commentary. It can be a real force for change, social, behavioral, even financial.
It certainly seems that way. Okay, next up, question 5. What about absolute standards for good art? Are there any? And what are the implications of claiming there are?
Ah, the eternal debate. Is it all just subjective taste, or are there actual rules for what makes art good?
Well, the source definitely pushes back against the idea of simple, universal standards. It highlights how different cultures, different traditions value very different things aesthetically, things that might get missed if you're only using, say, traditional Western benchmarks.
Like symmetry or realism being the goal.
Kind of. Think about Japanese concepts like wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection and things being temporary.
Or kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold.
Exactly. Celebrating the flaws, the history, not hiding them. That's a completely different aesthetic value system compared to striving for, pristine perfection.
Right. Or K-pop choreography versus Western contemporary dance.
Good example. K-pop often prizes that incredible synchronized group precision. Western dance might value individual expression more. Neither is inherently better art.
Just different goals, different aesthetics.
Precisely. And even within the West, standards evolve. Look at Black Panther, a Marvel superhero movie.
Great film.
And it got a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars. That really challenged some of the Academy's traditional genre biases, didn't it? It forced a recognition of artistic merit in a place some might have dismissed as just entertainment.
So defining good art is really complex, maybe even impossible in absolute terms. It's heavily influenced by culture and context.
That seems to be the point. And appreciating those different aesthetic approaches actually makes our understanding of art richer, not weaker.
Okay, so if standards are relative, question 6 asks, who does decide what art gets valued today? And how? Because it feels like the old gatekeepers maybe don't have all the power anymore.
That's exactly what the source suggests. The power dynamic is shifting, becoming much more distributed. It's not just critics, curators, and big institutions calling the shots.
So who else is involved?
Well, algorithms, for one, social media platforms, even things like blockchain technology.
Algorithms, like how?
Think about the South African illustrator Crevo Poppy. The source mentions her work getting huge visibility through Instagram's Explore algorithm.
Right, bypassing the traditional gallery route.
And that led directly to big commercial collaborations. Like with Nike, the algorithm played a key role in elevating her work and establishing its value in a certain sphere.
That's fascinating. And AI curators, Art Basel, Hong Kong.
Yeah. The plan for 2025 includes an AI-curated section, with sales potentially happening via smart contracts on the blockchain. In that scenario, code itself influences visibility, placement, and probably value.
Wow. Code as a curator and dealer. And what about the Sotheby's glitched auction example?
That's wild, too. Artist Rosa Menkman's work apparently surged in value, partly because tech influencers were live streaming the auction on Twitch.
So gamer culture and streaming platforms influencing fine art prices.
It looks like it. Merging those worlds, it just highlights this big shift. Value isn't just dictated from the top down anymore. It's bubbling up from online communities, algorithms, new digital marketplaces, a much more complex picture.
Okay, makes sense. Question 7 then brings it back to us, to you listening. Should your personal judgment about art count as much as an expert's? How do we balance our own feelings with, informed analysis?
Yeah, this is a common tension, isn't it? The source suggests that, look, your personal response, what you feel, what connects with you is totally valid. It's meaningful.
Okay, my gut reaction matters.
Absolutely. But expert knowledge brings something else to the table. Context, history, understanding the techniques, the formal qualities, the place of the work in a larger conversation. That adds depth.
So both are important.
It seems so. But the source also notes that sometimes the public's collective reaction can actually reveal blind spots in expert opinion.
Like with Star Wars, The Last Jedi.
That's the classic example cited. Huge difference between the critic scores and the audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes. Massive debate online. It showed a real disconnect in what different groups valued in the film.
Whose opinion was right? Well, depends who you ask.
Exactly. Or the Turner Prize in 2019 incorporating a public vote. The public chose Assemble, this architecture collective doing community projects.
Over maybe more traditional sculptors or painters.
Right. It showed the public valuing a different kind of artistic contribution, maybe focused more on social impact.
And even museums are listening more. MoMA's Art Lab.
Yeah, letting visitors interact with art digitally, and then using that interaction data to inform curation. It suggests institutions are looking for ways to incorporate that public perspective.
So my opinion counts, but expert opinion adds crucial layers. And maybe the crowd has wisdom too. It's not a simple hierarchy.
Seems like a good summary. Okay, final question, number 8. What role does the history of an art form play when we look at art being made right now?
How important is knowing the past to understand the present? Seems pretty important, I guess.
Absolutely essential, according to the source. History provides the framework. It helps us understand if a new work is building on tradition, reacting against it, smashing it, remixing it.
You need the baseline to see the innovation.
Exactly. Think about Hamilton.
Lin-Manuel Miranda, yeah.
To really get what makes it so brilliant, you kind of need to know something about traditional Broadway musicals and something about 90s hip-hop.
The genius is in how it blends and plays with both histories.
Right. Or these huge concerts in Fortnite.
Yeah.
Travis Scott, Billie Eilish.
Feels totally new, cutting edge.
And it is, in many ways. But it's also part of a longer lineage of virtual performances. The source mentions Suzanne Vega performing in Second Life way back in 2007.
Wow, okay, so there's a history there too.
Knowing that adds context. It frames these new events not just as isolated phenomena, but as evolutions.
And even TikTok filters. Data moshing.
Yeah, those glitchy, distorted video effects, they seem like fun, disposable digital toys, right?
Funny, yeah.
But they actually have roots in early internet art from the late 90s, groups like Jody.org, who were experimenting with digital aesthetics and breaking code. Knowing that history reframes the TikTok filter, it's not just a gimmick. It's part of a longer artistic conversation about digital manipulation.
So understanding the history gives contemporary work much more depth and meaning. You see where it came from.
Precisely. It lets you see innovation as part of that ongoing story.
Okay, so wrapping this all up then, this deep dive into the arts perspectives,
Yeah.
it feels like the big themes are constant change and interconnection.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen how artistic knowledge isn't really lost. It just sort of hibernates and resurfaces.
Mm.
How meaning isn't just down to the artist, but evolves with audiences in time.
And how context is just incredibly powerful in shaping what we understand. We also saw how art can genuinely impact the world, change behavior, shift perspectives.
Right. And the complexities around judging art, how good is often relative, and how the power to decide what's valuable is shifting towards, well, algorithms and online communities alongside traditional institutions.
And finally, yeah, the importance of history. You can't really get contemporary art without understanding where it fits in that longer conversation.
It really paints a picture of the arts as this living contested archive, as the source puts it, always evolving, always being argued over,
Your
reinterpreted.
living archive. I like that. So the final thought we want to leave you with is this. How does your own background, your own life, shape how you see and value the art you encounter?
And thinking about all these shifts, AI, algorithms, changing values, what do you think artistic knowledge might even look like in the future? Something to chew on.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.